Now, Craig was at the police station and he told the police that he went to Jane's house that night to have consensual sex, and that, he'd often been before and she would pay him £200 and she really enjoyed it. And he also told the police that she drank to excess, and police were just not having any of this. They just thought it sounded strange. She was 72, he was 25. I mean, it's not unheard of, but still, a frail, vulnerable old lady. And it just wasn't piecing together. What he was saying just didn't make any sense. And so they put pressure on Craig Keogh for a confession, but they knew they had their man and he wasn't going anywhere at this point, anywhere other than a cell. So with the DNA and other items found, including witness statements from the night of and the day after this happened, Craig was arrested with first-degree murder and a court date was set. Now, the court heard how after the murder, Craig was acting like he had not a care in the world, and he left his caravan and was seen the following day after the murder on CCTV carrying a black bin liner, which was said to have most of Jane's things in it that he had taken the night before. And he went straight to the pawn shop and he took Jane's wedding ring and the crucifix and the other items that he had got. Now, it was said that these items were probably worth about £900. He pawned these items for £105. Her wedding ring, her crucifix, and all the other items were eventually recovered by the police. The items that they recovered from the pawn shop also had Craig's DNA all over them, as well as Jane's. And according to friends, that day after the murders, he was happy and bubbly. He was out with his friends, he met them for lunch, and he was flashing the cash. He had taken Jane's handbag, which apparently had £300 in it, although the handbag was never found. This money he obviously used to splash in front of his friends, the lifestyle he was trying to portray, and he was buying everybody food and buying everybody drinks with the money he'd got from Jane's handbag and pawning her jewellery. So she had a phone and he'd taken the phone with him and he threw this down a drain. Now, this was also later recovered and this also had his DNA on it as well as Jane's. And that day he took himself to a shop to treat himself to a new tongue piercing for £60. Also Jane's money paying for this. In court, Craig refused to give any evidence and pleaded not guilty, but eventually I think he realised that this wasn't going to make his situation any easier for him, and he pleaded guilty to the robbery of Jane. And he did say he did have sex with her, but it had been consensual. They had talked and afterwards they'd watched a war film together on the TV, and then he'd gone home. But the defence argued that there'd not been any war film on that night, and that would not have fitted the timeline of events. And so after all the evidence in the case was heard, including like the DNA evidence and his baseball cap being found and ending up behind her headboard, and the tongue bar that had been found in her skin, and all the DNA on all of this, and the jury did not take long to deliver their verdict. Craig Keogh was sentenced to 32 years in prison for the murder and rape and burglary of Jane Hings. Craig will be 57 years of age when he is even considered for release from jail, and to me, I don't think he should ever be released. He's a dangerous criminal who preyed on a fragile, vulnerable, weak, unsuspecting woman, and I just can't understand how anybody could commit such a crime. I mean, he's 25. Surely he could have gone out and met somebody his own age and had sex with them. Surely he was going out with his friends, he was drinking all night. He could have met someone in a bar, he could have met someone in a pub. He did not need to go to a 72-year-old woman's house, but that's just my opinion anyway. And then the chief detective inspector said, I cannot imagine the pain and that Jane suffered. She was older, she was vulnerable, and relied on people to help her. And this was a sustained attack. And the horror of what was happening to her must have been unbearable. And just knowing that no one could help her. But there was just such good police work involved in this case. It was solved really quickly. I think with the DNA as well, that was just, it was put through and profiled so quickly, and they'd got back the DNA of Craig because they must have had it on the system from his prior convictions. And what with the witness statements that showed him for how he really was, a drug-fueled narcissist who was only interested in his own needs rather than his actions and how they affected other people. But you will be pleased to know that Paddy the Greyhound went to live with Jane's friend, and she said, Paddy was the light of Jane's life, and I will look after Paddy until the day he dies and look after him well. So that's a really nice part of the story. So I'm going to read for you what the judge concluded, and these were his words. He said, "You knew Jane, and you knew how vulnerable she was because you walked her dog on a number of occasions. You went out with friends. You had little money on you, and you were behaving badly. And your intentions will never be known, but I am satisfied that you intended to steal from Jane Hings that night. But what you did was far worse. You brutally raped her before smothering her with her own pillow. You removed her jewellery forcibly, and you knew what you had done." And he went on to say, "I'm satisfied why you murdered Jane Hings was so that she would not identify you as having robbed her and raped her. I'm satisfied when you held the pillow over her face, you intended to kill her. There was no evidence of remorse for what you did that night, and the next day your behaviour was callous. You even told police that Jane drank to excess and regularly paid you for sex. These were both lies." Craig Keogh was sent to prison for his crimes, and Jane's friends were still grieving the loss of a loved one, but they were pleased that they had some kind of justice for her. But then something strange happened. A man called Clive Ellis was walking the streets in Northampton, minding his own business, when he just happened to look down and find a Category A ID prisoner card broken in half on the floor. It was just laying there. And so it was Craig's card. It had Craig Keogh's name on it. So of course he took it to the media, and the media just had a field day with this. And they were having all these stories speculating, was he on the run, had he was he loose? This wasn't going to be doing anything for the poor community that was still grieving for Jane's loss, and the people around the neighbourhood that would be concerned that this Category A murderer could possibly be on the loose. So the Ministry of Justice had to look into this, and they had to stage this massive investigation as to how this card had ended up on the streets. But they needed to quickly reassure the public that Craig was not on the run and he was safely locked away, and concluded that it had possibly been discarded somehow on transport between prisons, because he had been relocated from the initial prison that he'd been sent to Full Sutton prison in Yorkshire, in York. And they wondered if at some point it had been broken in half, because obviously he didn't need it anymore because he was moving to a new prison, so he's going to get another one. So it had been discarded somehow in transit. I mean, it must have been from the guards, because surely he's locked in the back of this van and he's no way of getting out, and he wasn't wandering around in Northampton. So it was just really strange. But the Ministry of Defence and, you know, the police did come out and say, look, it's fine, he is locked away, do not worry, he's not on the streets. And of course that reassured everybody. But to find that car just laying there must have been, you know, quite distressing when the media put that out. Well, this was just a truly terrible and upsetting case, and a fragile, vulnerable woman who relied on people to help her, and she put her trust in so many people, not only because she needed to, but because she wanted to. She was just such a nice person, and I just hope that her friends and carers remember the good memories of Jane, of when they went round and caught up with her and had a cup of tea, and you know, they were not overshadowed by the horrendous acts committed by Craig Keogh. So that concludes my case today, and that was another solved true crime case in England, in the UK. Well, I'm going to have another case for you in the next few days. It's going to be the case of Lindsay Hawker, and Lindsay was murdered when she went over to Japan to teach some English in a gap year. So I will be having that case next. If you would like to subscribe, please do so, because this really helps my channel. You don't know how much it helps, and if you could give a thumbs up, that'd be even better. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.